Welcome onto this edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. It is a Q&A edition, and we've got some great questions to get through. We're going to be talking about cadence and whether or not you should be concerned about it. We're going to be talking about tying your shoelaces, whether you pronate or not. Interesting question. I don't think we've ever been asked that on the podcast before. We're going to talk about getting your running mojo back and whether you should be pushing your easy runs into zone 3. My name is Brad Nadelt. We've got the coach, Lindsey Parry, with us once again. Lindsey, great to catch up. I'm going to squeeze a question in for myself, if that's okay. I ran a marathon yesterday, and my question is why? Why the hell do we do these things to ourselves?
The unanswerable question, and you joke about that, Brad, but I once did a 250k race through the desert, and I was young, and I was so broken afterwards that I actually went to see a sports psychologist because I asked that exact question of the sports psychologist. Anyway, we had a discussion around it, and then at the end of the session, he said, "Well, listen, from what I can tell, Lindsey, it's not an obsession that's making you unhappy. So I know you can't answer the question why you do it, but what I will tell you is that it's not unhealthy. So I think it's okay for you to continue doing this, but I'm sorry, I can't answer the why, and it's not destructive. So keep going." So
Yeah.
I don't know why you do. I know why you're doing it, Brad. It's because you want to do a 50-mile race. But yeah, I can't give you the existential why. That's something you'll have to work on yourself. But to the same answer my psychologist gave me at the time, and spending quite a lot of time with you, it suits you. You're definitely happier while you are doing this, while you are riding your bike and training for comrades. So
I don't
yeah,
know
I
about
would keep
while. I
going.
don't know about while I'm doing it. Maybe like after or before, but not while. While there's lots of questions and questioning of life choices. It's definitely not while. That is for sure. But yeah, I did think about it. I mean, you talk about training for an ultra marathon. I'm going to have to do that and another park run. So 2 marathons and a park run on top of each other in a few months from now. And I, again, yesterday was like, how and why? But you know what? I'm going to trust the process. I'm sure we'll get there. Sheesh, it doesn't matter how fit you are, Lindsey, marathons are hard. That's, again, just what I realized yesterday. It's just, they don't get easier. They just get slightly faster, I think.
I think it's the ultimate test, Brad. I think ultra marathons, the intensity of the ultra marathon drops enough that I feel like ultra marathons are relatively easier than a marathon. I really do feel like that kind of inflection point at 20 miles, 32 kilometers. The last 7 to 10 Ks of a marathon are always just really mentally and physically tough, more so than an ultra marathon.
Yeah, they never get easier. If you've never done a marathon, yeah, they just, I don't know. I don't even want to say to somebody do it because I'm still not quite sure if you should be doing them. It's like maybe ask me this question in a week. We'll chat about it then. Don't forget, if you have questions you'd like answered here on the podcast, super easy to get them submitted. All you need to do is click on the link that's in the description. You can go through. We love video questions. Okay, we filter those to the top. You can also send us a voice note, or you can type your question out as well. Those are the 3 ways you can submit them. Click on the link and do that. And that's exactly what Joel did. Lindsey, he sent us a video, and here is his question.
Eugene, Oregon. I picked up running during the pandemic and been running some 5Ks. And I do have a couple of quick questions about the workouts. One is during my workouts, it takes me a while to warm up, usually 1 to 2K or about a mile before I feel like I'm warmed up. So during the shorter runs, which I count, it takes me about half the run before I actually feel like I'm in my real stride. Not that I'm going that fast. I'm trying to stay slow and in zone 2. And then the second question I have is that during my long runs, this seems to make sense, but I thought it'd be good to verify that I start out slow as usual to warm up. And then as I go along, I try to intentionally increase my pace slightly. So that by the time I'm at the end of the run, I'm at the top end of what I consider to be my zone 2, which might actually leak into zone 3, but that's me. Anyways, those are my questions. Thanks.
Cool. Lindsey, let's talk about the warm-up. Do we count it as part of the run? Is there an easier way to do it? And what about leaking your easy runs into zone 3? Is that the thing to do?
So, I often do this, and that is that there's like more than one part to this answer. So, in terms of your day-to-day easy training runs and interval training runs, yes, I would count the warm-up as part of the overall run, and it's perfectly normal. I mean, I can count on one hand the number of people that I've run with in my lifetime that have no problem and don't need a warm-up and can go screaming out the door at their easy run pace and have no problem. And then one of those was my decade-long training partner, Kirsten Lehmans, who it would frustrate him no end that I'd force him to run slowly for the first mile or two up to 3Ks because I need to warm up exactly in this exact way, is just to be a bit slower, really just let my body warm up, come to itself, and then go for it. I think the bigger question there is what to do in terms of, you're training for a 5K, so what are we going to do to help you to be ready and to go from the beginning of the 5K in a race situation? And that would be to warm up. So you are going to do 1 to 2 miles, nice easy running before you get onto the start line, to do a couple of leg swings and some hip rotations, perhaps a few gentle toe heel raises so that you can just get the ankles, the hips, and everything ready to go. And then a couple of little strides or builds just to take you up to race pace for a couple of meters. Do that 2 or 3 times. And when you start on the start line of a race, you can go for it from the gun. Of course, if you're taking a long time to warm up, and so you've got half an hour run scheduled, but you can actually only feel like you're in your running stride with 10 minutes left to go, then I would incorporate some walking early on in your run. So, in fact, in your session, so let's say you got a half an hour session, I would put 45 minutes aside for that session. I would do a 3, 4, 5 minute walk, do some leg swings, do some hip mobilities just to get the hips freed up, then spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of that run just finishing that warm up, and then you get 20 minutes of kind of being in that zone 2 and feeling your stride. The second question is, no, you shouldn't, and then a little asterisk that there are times where that's not necessarily indicated to do through your own physical effort, but because of how physiology works. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that shortly. So on your stock standard easy run day, zone 2 is the target. If you're going out of zone 2, we want to walk and to pull you back into zone 2. Okay. For your long runs, particularly when you're training for things like 5 and 10K, the answer is no. We don't really want these runs where we are pushing through zone 2 and particularly into zone 3. There might be a place for that on your top end marathon runners. But for by and large, the vast majority of people, that's not how we want to train. What's important to note, however, is that when we do long training runs, there is a phenomenon known as cardiac drift. And what that means is that at equivalent intensity, so in other words, if you keep running at the same effort and similar pace, as that run progresses, your heart rate will start to go up and it will tend to go to zone 2 and sometimes possibly scrape 3. The important thing there is that you must be able to feel that that is not an intentional shift. So you're not running harder or pushing harder or digging deeper to maintain that pace. But if you are able to carry on talking, if the relative intensity feels exactly the same as it is, that cardiac drift is normal. And really all it is response to is that as we run, we sweat. And as we sweat, we lose fluid. And the biggest reservoir for fluid in the human body is the blood. And so effectively, we are losing blood volume. And because we're losing blood volume, the heart just has to beat a little bit faster so that it can keep the fluid moving around the body, and we can get oxygen to the working muscles. We can remove the byproducts of exercise away from the muscles. And so we do get this uptick. And the hotter it is and the longer you go on for, the higher that climb will be. And if you're running in a marathon or ultra marathon, that can drift all the way into zone 4. But if you can feel like I'm not breathing any harder, I'm still feeling the same, but now my heart rate has gone up, that is normal. But we don't want to intentionally push ourselves so that the effort goes up, and then we get this corresponding uptick of heart rate.
Yeah, Lindsey, it's interesting. You often talk about this in our Fast Beyond 50 masterclass that we put on every now and again, where you get exactly the same physiological benefit running at the lower end of zone 2 as you do at the top end of zone 2. And often we see it so often with athletes, and particularly over 50s, where we almost feel, and we're all guilty of this, where we almost feel like we need to feel like we're working, that if we're running on the lower or slower end of zone 2, it doesn't feel like we're actually doing anything. So are we actually getting any benefit? But the impact and the damage that it does on your physically on your body, the muscle tearing and that sort of thing, obviously at the higher end or into zone 3 is much higher than at the lower end. So you're getting the same benefit but at more cost on your body, which allows or takes longer to recover, and then it doesn't leave you in a good position for your next session, whether it be another easy run or a high intensity session. Have I summarized that?
You have distilled it down really nicely.
Perfect. Cool. Joel, thank you so much for your question. If you have a question, do like Joel did, pop it on video and we'll filter it to the top. Next question for today's podcast comes from Greg Lawson, who's in Vegas, in Brisbane, in Australia. Greg saying, I'm hoping I can get some advice on whether increasing my cadence should be a priority, and if that naturally means shifting more toward the forefoot strike. Are the two linked? When I consciously focus on landing more forward, it feels like there's less strain on my knees, less impact on my heels. As much as my run goes on, I tend to slip back into a lower cadence. Would maintaining a higher cadence actually improve my efficiency? And is it worth actively working on?
So this is such a hard question to answer, Brad, because I have attended so many seminars over my 30 plus year coaching career. And there have been periods in this coaching journey where I've been to one of these things and someone has convinced me that this type of biomechanical intervention is worth it, and I have gotten excited about it again, and I have tried it. Okay. And I think from a theoretical point of view, the value it seems quite big. Okay. And the theoretical model, it looks like the gains are absolutely worth the effort. My practical experience, though, has been different. My practical experience is that it's very difficult to change. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is that exactly the experience here is that it starts off well, but as soon as we are placed under any pressure, whether that's external in a race where we have to do a sprint finish, or whether it's in response to the nature of the task that we set ourselves and the pressure is in the form of fatigue or concentration or lack thereof, we revert to type. And this I witnessed when I spent multiple years. So particularly when I was coaching and trying to get young athletes through the junior ranks in the triathlon scene and into the world triathlon circuit. And I was convinced that this was the way to buy a few seconds per kilometer, particularly when running off the bike, and particularly when you are under fatigue already when you jump off the bike. And honestly, all I saw was, after years and years of effort, is that as soon as these guys get put under, and females get put under any pressure, boom, they just reverted to their cadence. And when I took a step back and tried to figure out why, what I realized is that there may well be an ideal cadence for you as an athlete. I haven't come across anything that can help me individualize who should be at what cadence. And again, my experience with working with top level international athletes and people who just want to finish an ultra. My experience with all of those people is that when we train appropriately, we arrive at a place that works very well for our body, particularly from a cadence point of view. And that's why we don't all run with the same cadence. And we have modeled the ideal cadence on Kenyans, Ethiopians, world champions. And I think that's part of why we got this wrong. Okay. So one of the things that's mentioned in the question there is like they can feel less pressure on the knees, I think was the comment. And so there are some of these tangible things that you feel like should improve, but the concentration required, the amount of time and effort required, and the ability to stay in the moment and concentrate on it all the time. Now, if that's for a marathon, are you going to concentrate on your stride frequency for 4 hours? I don't think anybody's going to do that. And so I don't think it's a practical solution to the problem. I think what's much better is doing strides, doing running drills, doing some higher intensity work to help with the coordination of your running, doing the strength training so that it can support the mechanics that you are born with, and then doing the optimal amount of training for you as an individual to develop that efficiency for you, your running style, and your cadence.
Such a great question, Greg. Thank you so much for submitting it. Yeah, Lindsey, it's so interesting because, again, like if I use myself as an example, biomechanically, like if you had to look at a world-class Kenyan runner and look at what they do biomechanically, and then obviously a lot of these cadence studies and that are on these elite athletes, and then you look at someone like myself, and I'm on the total opposite end of that scale. You would have the Kenyan here, and I would be on the other side. So to expect someone like me, and I mean, I don't know Greg's ability and biomechanically sort of how he is, but it's impossible to expect someone who's an average runner to be able to do what world-class runners do from a running style and that sort of thing perspective. So yeah, it's super interesting.
And it also changes the physiological demand quite a lot, Brad. It's much easier to do this on a bicycle than it is in running. But on a bicycle, you know, they talk about pedal stroke efficiency and using less absolute power. So increase your cadence. Okay, fine. For Lindsey Parry, that might work a treat because I'm so strong aerobically that so spinning out at like 110 RPM at a much lower power per stroke might work very well for me because it's taxing my cardiovascular system and not taxing my musculoskeletal system quite as much. But if you did that, you might just be completely out of breath after 10, 15 minutes of doing that, whereas you might be better at going at 85 or 90 RPM on your bike and actually relying a little bit more on the fact that you are stronger than I am in absolute terms. It's easier to do that experiment on a bike, a little bit harder on the run, but the consequence is the same. If I increase my stride frequency to 100, straight to my cardiovascular system, and that may or may not be an advantage depending on the individual that you're working with. And then you've got this added problem of, okay, well, now I have to focus so hard to keep it there. Is it really doing me the good that makes this worthwhile?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Greg. Thank you so much for that. Next one from Mark Reynolds. Mark's in Vancouver in Canada. Mark says, hey, Lindsey and Brad, I started running in November, but after a tough couple of weeks. I'm finally back on track. My question is this. Before I get into the question, I was just doing the math, Lindsey. He lives in Vancouver, Canada, and started running in November. Mark, that wasn't a wise life choice. Starting running in the middle of a Canadian winter. Definitely not good. He says, my question is about heart rate zones. No matter how slow I go, even if I'm jogging at a snail's pace or incorporating a lot of walking, I still end up in zone 5, according to my heart rate chest monitor. I'm 55. My target should be around 136 beats per minute, but I struggle to keep it anywhere near that. Always creeps up to 145 plus and beyond. Strange thing is, I don't feel like I'm pushing that hard. I've got my first math test coming up soon, and I want to make sure I'm training the right way. Any advice how to truly stay out of zone 5 and train effectively with the right heart rate range? Thanks in advance. If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
So, Mark, I have to answer this question again as if I'm talking to two different people, because there's a few little details that I can't get from you before I answer it here. So Brad alluded to Vancouver winter. We know Canada is extremely cold in winter. So obviously this wouldn't apply if you are training indoors, but if you're training outdoors, then in extreme cold weather, the accuracy of heart rate measurement definitely decreases, and it decreases because of the equipment, but it also decreases because of layers of clothing. So there is a point at which there's like, I don't know if it's a static buildup, but there's definitely some interference that happens once we start layering up. So if you're training outdoors, then part of the problem that you might be struggling with here is actually just inaccuracy of reading. Obviously, if you're training on a treadmill indoors, then that's not going to apply to you. But it's important that I mention it, because that may well apply to someone else who's struggling with similar thing to what you are. The second part of this is actually just a pure individualization of heart rate. Okay, you talk about starting up again. So typically people that have gotten unfit or haven't exercised for years, they tend to actually have lower maximum heart rates than individuals who stay active their whole life. So you may have actually stayed active for most of your life, and therefore actually have a higher than an age-graded heart rate, or in this scenario, because you're in our ecosystem and you've mentioned the word math, so the 190 minus age might actually be also just not completely accurate for you, because of the same reason that you might just have a naturally, so genetically higher heart rate, or you've been active for most of your life and so you have a high heart rate anyway. So in these scenarios where people are struggling like this, once you've been running for 4 weeks consistently, and I'm fairly happy that the risk of hurting you is low, I would actually send you out for a 3-mile, 5-kilometer hard run. Not necessarily your absolute best effort, but trying to get you close-ish to that. And then we would analyze your heart rate and go, listen, you are someone who revs really high. So 135 is not an appropriate target for you. 143 might be a more appropriate target. But we would want to individualize that so that we can make sure that, number one, you are actually training or using the right basis for selecting that lower intensity. So those are the two areas that I look at.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much for that question. The next one comes from Simon Bennett, who's in Edinburgh in Scotland. Simon says, hi there. Last year I trained for a half marathon in July and ran it solo as a long training run, finishing in 2:45. It was one of the hottest days of the year, and I didn't manage my hydration well, which made things tougher than expected. I know an actual race environment, crowds, aid stations, that extra motivation makes a big difference. Lately, though, life has got in the way, makes the family stress, and helping my 90-year-old mother-in-law relocate meant my energy was focused elsewhere. I still kept up the strength training twice a week and did some hiking, but overall my running has taken a back seat. The truth is I haven't trained much at all. My motivation's taken a bit of a hit. I know I need to start building up again, but I'm struggling to find that spark. What can I do to get my mojo back and make sure I'm on track for race day? Any small wins or strategies that might help me regain consistency and enthusiasm?
Yeah, so this is such a good question, Simon. And I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this recently, both because of a few talks that I've been giving, my own running journey where I am right now, and of course, the more we immerse ourselves in this 50 and beyond category and health span, etc., and where we're kind of going. And I think the important thing here is that motivation and discipline alone just can't do the job that we needed to do to keep us consistent over long periods of time. So what we need to do is find something short term that motivates you, because we want to motivate you to get you started. Once you started and you've got the right goal, the discipline keeps in to keep you going long enough to create the habit. And the habit is actually the most important step in this process. And I think it's a little bit what you've experienced here, is that habit can be broken in the short term by life. Okay. In your instance, it was helping your 90-year-old mother-in-law, and there is no way around these sorts of things coming up in our lives. But then it's having the right goal so that once that disruption of our habits has been removed, we have that short-term motivation at hand to leap right back in, use the disciplines, keep going. Once the habit's created, it then tends to go along until we have another one of these life things that happened. And quite frankly, that's the exact cycle that I am sitting in now, and it's why I'm thinking about this. And I had this conversation with my coach at the start of this year, because that was it. I'd get through these really great periods of consistency and life would happen. A school tour, kids involved in a production, have to go to the Olympics, boohoo, poor me. But the point is that is disruptive. It's disruptive, and then it's like, okay, but what's the short-term motivation so that disruption doesn't keep on playing in? And then that's what we've got to find for you, Simon. And now the half marathon is the longer-term, medium-term, longer-term goal. So what other little goals can we put in place? And that is to hit maybe some 5Ks to get you to a point where we know that you're seeing the encouragement that you're going to improve on that 245. It could be as simple as going, right, when I open my training platform, I don't want to see any red blocks. I just want to see green. So this week, my motivation is I love the color green. I want to see green blocks. I'm going to peg a time that I want to do for my 5K, or write down a time that you want to achieve on that half marathon. Make it a little bit scary, because then you know, like, if I don't get up and do something about this, I'm never going to get anywhere near that time. So you need to create some short-term motivation, and maybe that's sucking a buddy in. Maybe this short-term motivation is sucking a friend in with the same goal, so that you are not just letting yourself down by not getting out there, you're also letting them down, or even better, a positive reinforcer that's you can look forward to seeing them at the road. So I'm going to go and meet my buddy, and we're going to have a good old chat or moan, because neither of us feels like doing this today, but we're there keeping each other accountable.
Yeah, Lindsey, it's quite funny. Like in my build up this time around, obviously I took quite a bit of time off training, and for the last 2 years I've been super consistent. And one of the things that got me back into it wasn't having a big goal. I just found that the pressure of having this race that was looming over me really didn't help. That it was like I didn't want to think about it. And what I did was I found an app. I don't even know what it's called. I found an app. It basically just, you can log streaks essentially. And it's not necessarily a streak that you're running every single day, but I set up a couple of streaks in various aspects of my life. So one of them was running 4 days a week. And that's all I focused on, was making sure that I got out 4 days a week. And there was this like dopamine hit. And as soon as I got to number 4, I got this ping on my phone, and cool, I did the 4. And then there was like one I'd set up a streak for meditation as an example, or making sure that I was drinking enough water, just little things like that. And then I was just chasing those. I was chasing those streaks and seeing if I could, like you say, turn those blocks green essentially. And that made a huge difference. And then once I was back in the habit of it, then I started looking at some races, and then I got fired up because I was doing a race. So I didn't have that sort of heavy thing of, oh, I need to train for a race because I've got this massive goal. It was just a case of, hey, this week I want to run 4 days. That's all I want to do. So that made a huge difference for me.
Yeah, and I downloaded an app which is all based around parkrun. And again, it wasn't so much about running a specific time at parkrun. You know, it was getting my Bee Gees, getting the Bee Gees, and getting my 7 C's and an R, getting the Pirate Challenge. So it became, yeah, so exactly that, like this weird little challenge. We've spoken about this on a few different platforms. It's like, how did I get myself doing the strength training as consistently as I've done it this year? I set myself a bizarre goal of being able to do 3 sets of 8 pull-ups by the end of the year. And how do I do that? Well, I've got to come and practice doing pull-ups. And so while I'm doing my pull-ups, that's gotten me doing everything else. So yes, that's to your point, is like, let's think of little things that can get the short-term motivation that creates the need for a little bit of discipline that then leads to the habits. And once the habit's there, the rest of it genuinely is that much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Question from David Clark in Auckland, New Zealand. He said, hi, Lindsey. I recently picked up a new pair of running shoes and noticed something interesting. My right foot always seemed to push too far forward, or the toe box felt too roomy. After a quick search online, I learned that my shoe wear pattern suggests I have a slight pronation, which might be the cause. At 54, I finally figured out how to properly tie running shoes. Who knew? Since our feet change as we age, I'm curious, how much of a difference does lacing technique really make for runners with pronation or supination? Should runners with different foot types be tying their shoes differently? And if so, what is the best way to do it? Would love to hear your thoughts. Interesting question.
Yeah, it's again a cool question, because it's the sort of thing that as runners that have been running for a very long time, we just completely take for granted. Okay, so I don't think it makes a difference whether you supinate, pronate, or have a neutral stride. I think you should tie your laces properly. I just think that becomes possibly more important, because when you supinate or pronate, you've got a bigger probability of sliding around in the shoe. And really, what tying your laces properly, and we'll get into that in a moment, what it really entails is kind of locking your foot in place a little bit. Not that there's no room for the foot to slide, but just so that we're not getting really big shifts of the foot across the top of that insole in your running shoe, because otherwise you are going to get like proper pockets of irritation, toes, blisters, back of the heel, bruising, all these kind of things that'll happen if there's lots of movement of your foot in the shoe. And with supination, we're on a smaller surface area, and pronation, where you're rolling through the shoe. Both of those things are obviously then going to exaggerate that movement, but also create particular hot spots based on that movement. So what do we want to do? We want to kind of lock that foot in place, which means that we want the laces to go quite high up. However, if we simply just thread the shoe all the way through and then tie it at the top, there's just too much risk of that being very tight and us making it too tight, locking it in place and making it very rigid. And if we do that, then we can run into potential problems with irritating tendons, irritating ligaments, irritating nerves. And so we don't want to do that. But what you can do is literally just build 2 little stirrups. So you get up to the second last point on that shoe, and you create a loop by bringing it back almost in on itself. And now we've got two little stirrups on either side of your shoe. And then you do your last locking in there and tight. And what that does is it now creates a bit of a snug fit. But those two little stirrups that you've put in there prevent you from tying that lace too tight. And it creates a little bit of play so that if you have made it just that little bit tight, the shoe can actually, as you're running, just work itself a little bit loose so that you're not putting too much pressure on the tendons and ligaments and nerves that kind of run just over the top of that ankle and into the shoe. But that's the reason why we do it, and that's how we do it. And that's why it's called the runner's knot, I guess.
There you go. Brilliant. Great question, David. Thank you so much. Don't forget, if you have a question you'd like submitted, all you need to do is click on the link that's in the description of this podcast or in the description on YouTube. We do filter the video questions to the top, so make sure you submit a video question. If you're not shy, we all friends here, and we love seeing and hearing you and seeing where you are as well. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. And then also just a quick shout out to Douglas Bennett, who left us a review on Apple Podcast. Douglas, we're going to send you a Coach Parry cap like this one. We will be in touch. Thank you so much for leaving that review. We really do appreciate it. Lindsey, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We look forward to catching up again next week. From the two of us, it's cheers.
Brilliant. Goodbye.